All right, so the assessment. Now, the assessment piece is the next step after the inventory and is just as important. Now that we know what we have to know whether what we have is ready to migrate. And this is a number of things that will no longer work at the destination. This is the most common list that I get. The URLs, the file path, and the file names, they're either too long, they basically have characters that are not supported that you have to take into consideration. Even if you're coming from an existing on-premises to another or on-premises to Office 365, you have to realize that the URLs might no longer work depending on your tenant, depending on the URL change that you might put into place. Some deep paths may just no longer work. The file size, the character limitations, custom solutions. Do you have sandbox solutions? Because a couple of weeks ago, months ago, Microsoft just kind of disabled any sandbox solution that had code in it from working in Office 365. That means you can expect something similar on premises as well. So if you have a number of custom solutions, how are you going to convert them into the next thing, whether it's a SharePoint framework or some kind of add-in or another type of way to provision your custom solutions into the destination environment? There is a solution out there from third parties as well that help you do that you can look for. Otherwise, you may have to rewrite the code yourself. So is that worth it? And that's where the inventory and the assessment comes in. You need to have an inventory of all your custom solutions, and then you need the assessment part to tell you what's in that custom solution. Does it just create content types, side columns, list libraries in your site? If that's the case, then you're fine. Or does it have actual code that runs within it that will not work at the destination that you have to think on how to create in a new method? Branding, folks, you could just forget about. There's no way to keep your branding whenever you change version. If you're going from 2013 to 2013 or 2016 to 2016, you're fine. Most likely you can obviously keep your branding, but there's no way, regardless of using tools or anything of the sort, there's no way to maintain the branding that you've developed on your SharePoint team sites, on your intranet, on whatever, to another version of SharePoint. All right, the HTML structure of the master pages, the controls for the site actions, the ribbon, all of that is completely different from version to version. In fact, there's even no longer any ribbon in SharePoint Online, and there's no longer going to be a ribbon in SharePoint 2016 in the future through feature packs as well once it catches up to SharePoint Online. So just think about that for a second. All of the branding, all of the CSS that you may have applied, that will no longer work. Workflows, that's a big question. Your workflow state, so is it in current running? What's the history of your workflows? That cannot, I repeat, cannot be kept unless you basically void your warranty with Microsoft. Because the only way to keep the workflow state in the history as you migrate to another version is to go and manipulate the SQL Server database, which makes you no longer supported by Microsoft. So basically, you can say goodbye to your workflow state in history. You can bring in your workflows, basically bringing your workflow configuration so the workflow still exists at the destination, but anything else is just not going to be kept. InfoPath, as long as you understand that what's the future of InfoPath, that it will no longer be supported in 2026, but that you can still use it both on Office 365 or on 2013, 2016, then you're fine. Go ahead and use InfoPath. You know, I'm more than happy to migrate that over for you. But the next, basically, though there's no migration path, Microsoft is looking to something called Power Apps to replace the same requirement that we used InfoPath for before, which is forms for SharePoint, but now it's also for other things than just SharePoint. Power Apps works both on premises with a gateway and with SharePoint Online as well. So you'll have to look at, okay, through the inventory that I have, how many InfoPath forms do we have? And what is the complexity and the requirements for these forms? Are they supposed to work on every browser? Are they supposed to work on mobile devices? Yes, then maybe that's going to go into a Power App instead because InfoPath is pretty much horrible for mobile device and the complexity of it. But if you're in a standardized environment, everybody using Internet Explorer version X, then you're fine. Go ahead and migrate your InfoPath form. You know, keep an eye for your permissions. If you look at, for example, SharePoint 2010, SharePoint 2010 has the owners group, the members group, and the visitors group, right? And in SharePoint 2013, 2016, or SharePoint Online, you have the same groups, owners, members, visitors. What you may have not have realized, however, is that the members group by default, as of 2013 and up, has much more power in terms of permissions, right? In 2010, all it could do is contribute, add or remove content. As of 2013 and up, they can also edit your site. That means create lists and libraries and delete them. So when you're doing your migration, you have to take into consideration that the permissions that you had granted for all of your sites, all of your lists and libraries to the members group, by migrating, you may be granting a whole lot more power that you may have not wanted initially. So that's to take into consideration. And again, that's what the inventory plus the assessment comes into play, right? The inventory is to know what you have. The assessment is to add all of these rules next to the inventory. And don't worry, I'll give you a way to automate all of this. But that's the way to be able to know this is going to be a problem. This is going to work. This is not going to work, right? Unsupported site templates. There's no more blank site template. If you're going to Office 365, the team site template has changed now. It's connected to Office 365 groups. Also, if you're going to migrate to Office 365, what about Office 365 group? Do you want your existing SharePoint site collections to migrate as independent site collections? Or do you want your SharePoint site collections to migrate as group connected site collections? So you have to take that into consideration as well. The community site template, the product catalog template. What are you going to do with all of your existing site templates, basically? What if you have the Fabulous 40, wow. All of these things. Orphaned users. Orphaned users is not the end of the world. Basically, it's users that had been granted access or in a metadata people or group column in your SharePoint list were added, and then these people have been disabled from your Active Directory. So they're still in your SharePoint site, they're still referenced, but they're kind of orphaned users. So you want to clean them up before you bring that to the destination. Oh boy, checked out files, my number one enemy. I don't know about you, if you're preparing a migration, definitely one of the first reports you want to run is give me a list of all the checked out files that I have in my environment. Because people forget to check them back in most of the time, right? Or they're checked out file from years ago, from months ago. You cannot migrate checked out files unless you're doing a database attach, and I'll talk to you about that in a few seconds. But you cannot migrate checked out files because they're checked out to the user. So you don't have access to any of the modifications made to that document since it's been checked out. So you want to contact the owners and ask them to check back in by this date and hour, for example, which would be your milestone of your migration. Same thing for your list templates and libraries template file extensions. Now let me talk to you about alerts. A very good friend, Rami in Heineken, and he gave me permission to talk about that story because at this point it's just better that you guys learn from that as well. So basically, they were doing a migration, and you have this thing on in SharePoint that's existed for quite some time now, and they're called user alerts. User alerts, if you're not familiar with it, is the ability for people to set alerts so that if something happens on a document or list, they get an email alert to tell them that, hey, somebody modified the document based on these conditions that you've set. I've sent you an alert. If you're going to do a migration and there are alerts, and you're not ready to tell your end users that their documents have been migrated because you're doing a multiple iteration, incremental migration, for example. This is especially typical for large scale migrations that take weeks or months usually. What happened there is that they migrated their SharePoint and they were going to tell everyone later on, but the user alerts got migrated, and so they triggered. And all of a sudden, thousands of end users at Heineken started getting emails about their documents in another location that they were not aware of being modified and created. So obviously, panic ensued because people were wondering, hey, what are you doing with my documents? Where are my documents going? There was no communication, and the alerts started triggering everywhere. So you definitely want to be very careful to disable alerts at the destination. Do your migration and re-enable alerts once you are finished and done for. This could be a timer job that you want to disable. This may be just the concept of alerts. And of course, depending on the tool that you use, you could choose to whether or not you want to migrate the alerts or not. But be aware that the alerts are going to do their job. It could be a really bad idea. So what about assessment? Is there a way for you to run a assessment? And what that means is you have a free tool from Microsoft. It's called the SMAT tool, the SharePoint Migration and Assessment tool. And it works specifically with 2013. It also works with 2013. And essentially what it does is it scans everything that you have. It's going to look for alerts, apps, browser file handling, checked out files, customized pages, master pages, email enabled lists, file versions that are too large, sites that are locked, large list views. I mean, it's going to go through the list of all the usual problems. And then it's going to generate a CSV and reports to tell you where you're going to have an issue. This is 100% free. Again, this is for the Microsoft version. Once again, you can look at third-party tools. Most of them have a free inventory and assessment tool as well that will give you a different layout and different visual. But the checks are usually the same. I do believe I have that that I saved on my computer. I apologize. I definitely should have prepared that beforehand. But let me go and check. I have it handy. Pre-migration analysis. I believe that is it. There we go. So I'm going to open up the Excel file. I'm going to open up and bring it to this screen as soon as it opens. Bear with me here. There we go. So this is essentially the type of things that you will get. It's going to scan, then you will have tabs. It'll tell you all the features that you have and where they are. It's going to give you web parts of what you have and where they are and things like this. Master pages, content, and it's going to give you kind of the condition, the errors that the potential problems that you can get by migrating to Office 365 or to the destination.